thank you for listening to this panel discussion. We've got a very interesting topic on the changing face of the landscape of our African source markets. And we've got a fantastic panel effectively representing 4 of our very important source markets. I'll introduce them each as I ask a first question, but we have Germany, USA, China, and effectively the UK here as well. So without further ado, I think we all know the background to this is that, well, I'm sure COVID has just changed the face of travel so radically that we're all very confused probably, and the changes keep on happening. We can't keep up with it, but we do know there's going to be a travel world post-COVID. There's already a travel world happening a little bit, and we want to try and probe a bit of what are our source markets doing differently, and what might they do differently traveling during COVID or post-COVID, however we want to look at that. So I thought I'd start by speaking to Chris Mears. Chris is the CEO of ATA, the Africa Travel and Tourism Association, I think is what it's called. He sits in the UK and he looks at travel to the entire continent, basically, from all markets, but particularly, I guess he's got a picture of the UK market. So for many of us in Africa, the UK is our single biggest source market. Certainly in South Africa, it's our single biggest source market. So that's why I'm starting with the UK. And the UK was sort of able to travel last year relatively okay, and then has gone into a very strict lockdown in many senses of the word, including outbound travel, I think in December. So Chris, I think it's the 12th of April that we're expecting the UK government to sort of give us a detailed route out of lockdown in terms of travel and how the Brits can travel. And have you got any idea where that might go when they announce on the 12th of April? And I know there's other dates or timetables that the UK lockdown is going to, but after the 21st of June, in theory, there's no restrictions. So have you got a sort of a feel for what might happen and what the UK citizens might be able to do in terms of traveling abroad soon?
Yeah, hi Gillian, and great to be here, great to be part of this panel. Got some fantastic people on it. So yeah, so we started off with not too much of a lockdown. We're more than 12 months into our lockdown now, but our current restrictions are that travel for leisure is currently illegal. So for the tourism industry, it's a desperate situation. However, our Prime Minister has announced a roadmap out of lockdown, and that has included the facilitation of travel. So currently we're sitting with a global travel task force in the UK. So what they're doing is they're reviewing the picture and providing some advice and some guidance as to what travel might look like coming out. So various associations around the UK and tourism businesses have been consulted. Us as the African Travel and Tourism Association have consulted and submitted information to the Global Travel Task Force. So what they're looking at is the global and domestic epidemiological picture. So understanding what's happening around the world with COVID and what's happening locally here in the UK. One of the key things that they're looking at are the variants of concern. So how COVID is mutating and changing, but also progress of the vaccination rollouts, both here and around the world. And understanding a little bit more around the efficacy of the vaccines. So in terms of a timeline, we're getting the report back from the Global Travel Task Force on the 12th of April. And from there, we'll have a much clearer picture as to what travel is going to be allowed, how it's going to work, what protocols are going to come into place. The next key date that we're looking at is going to be the 17th of May. So the 17th of May is the earliest date that's possible for international travel from the UK to resume. So we're hopeful that Africa is going to feature on that from the 17th of May, so we can start getting things moving. We would imagine that there's going to be some form of corridors, some form of traffic light system to understand which destinations the government sees as okay to travel to. We're pushing heavily for Africa to be included on those because of the protocols that are in place across the continent. And we're encouraging governments, tourism boards, and other parties to submit data and share their information. And then the next date from a UK perspective is the 21st of June. So 21st of June is the earliest date that we're likely to have the domestic restrictions lifted. So we're going to be able to go out and do things, and the wider economy within the UK is going to be open. So those are the 3 key dates that we're very much looking at. but they are the earliest dates that things can happen.
And do you sort of have an opinion on the chances of Africa or some African countries, knowing that we've got a lot of countries getting off what we call the red list currently and being open for corridors with the British, or do you think it's tough there? And does the South African variant narrative play a role in all of that?
Yeah, it is tough, and it's the big thing that's driving our red list, and it's not an outbound restriction, it's an inbound restriction. So it's Public Health England that are very much driving that red list. So what they're concerned about is it is the variants of concerns. So the changes in the virus, which is just natural, it's what it does. In the UK, we've got world-leading, I think it's genome mapping technology, so they can understand how the variant's changing, and they're very much studying it. So from an inbound perspective, everyone currently has to be tested on day 2 and day 8. Any of those positive tests are genome mapped, so they can understand how the variant is changing. The big challenge of coming out of Africa is the lack of statistics. That's why we're really encouraging the governments, and I know the British embassies and the British High Commissions, the diplomatic missions across the continent are encouraging their counterparts, the health services locally, to really share that data, share that information. Because once the government here has a strong picture and a clear picture as to what's happening, they're much more likely to open those corridors once again.
Okay. It's tough out there, but we were a little bit buoyed up. I hope you were as well when we heard the Lions tour is still coming. That there's a Lions tour, it'll be the players, we know for sure. We're not sure about spectators, obviously.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very encouraging thing that that a big event like that is coming to South Africa. And
of course, it'll be fantastic from a South African perspective in terms of profiling, but without the British spectators, we were expecting about 27,000. It's not going to have the tourism impact, so it'll still be very sad. I think there's lots more to ask about the UK, but we'll come back. Let's move on. I'm going to ask Mr. Marcus Lee, who's the president of the International China Investment Forum. And I've chatted with Marcus before at WTMs and about the Chinese market and its huge potential for the African continent and how big it is. So I think in China, we almost look at you as a sort of a leading indicator in terms of your domestic market and how the domestic market has apparently picked up very strongly. Obviously, because 140 million people couldn't travel overseas or thereabouts, so they're traveling within China, but you had a big domestic market already. So what are the trends in your domestic travel at the moment, destination-wise, group-wise, experience-wise? What's happening in your domestic market? Marcus, I think you might be on mute. Yeah, you are.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you, Gillian. Good day, everyone. Hello to all the participants, audience for WTM and ATW. Regarding the China trend, in terms of 2019 data, we have 169 million travel around the world. And to answer you, the question Gillian posted about the domestic market, that's a very convincing number last year, that over 600 million Chinese travel during the October holiday. We call it the Super Golden Week. How do we do that? As many of you may have known, and you read the news around the world, China have recovered about 95% domestically. And we have tested close to 200 million people. As of the data 3 weeks ago, we vaccinated about 80 million of our populations. So in terms of projections for this year, the good news is about 40% of Chinese projected to be vaccinated by July, and about 70% to be vaccinated by end of this year, latest early next year. And these are the data projection from the Chinese government authority. You asked me, Gillian, about the trends. I think many of us are interested about how things are moving and changing in terms of the Chinese demographic, how we behave. Previously, when you see Chinese coming to Africa, we move like a migration of African to visit your countries, to visit beautiful African countries. the things that is changed right now. We move from group to small group. We move from group to FIT. We move from group to tailor-made, etc. So for those operators in Africa, maybe you have to, it's time to consider your smaller group, time to consider self-driving, time to consider about how you handle FIT. Yeah, back to you, Gillian.
Thanks very much, Marcus. And in terms of what we all think is that people prefer open spaces, outdoor activities and things like that. Did you see that amongst the domestic? Were they choosing the less crowded experiences, or was it anything same as normal?
For sure, we all think the same. Safety concern is, of course, the #1 criteria. So how to do that? Some countries, they open up their country. For example, if you have islands or more isolated areas that we love to go there. That's why I mentioned self-driving just now. That's why I mentioned smaller group.
Yeah.
In terms of statistics, if you're interested, you know, Chinese used to be crazy about shopping. Now shopping still one of our preference, but dropped to the bottom list. In terms of travel intent, in terms of preferences of activities, surprisingly, islands rank #1. Maybe it's more secluded, more isolated.
Yeah.
And #2 will be culture, food, family, things like that. Lung washing. Lung washing is a big thing. Lung washing means clean air, means like open air. Like what do you say, Gillian? So we really like that right now. This is the trend. Back to you, Gillian.
So we should be selling our clean, well, we know, but particularly our clean air, of which we have lots, but unfortunately Johannesburg doesn't, where I live. And just a last quick question before I move on, and there's lots more to talk about. I think, am I right, the Chinese are not allowed to travel internationally for leisure at the moment, but correct me if I'm wrong. And when might that open up? What will the Chinese authorities be looking for to enable the Chinese to travel again? And have you got any idea on a timeline?
Let's look at the data right now. As I mentioned, updated, let's say March 17, 2021, a couple of days ago. As I say, China is 95% recovered. We have like 90,000 cases, but with 85,000 each recovered. So most of the Chinese within China, let's say in my city, Shanghai, Guangzhou, or Beijing, we can travel quite easily. We can talk about later on the protocol, how we managed to be at 95%. But to answer your question directly, when is China expected to travel? It depends on two key factors. #1, how fast we get vaccinated, and how fast you get vaccinated, our friends in Africa.
So you getting vaccinated looks very successful at the moment. Unfortunately, I mean, vaccination, the way that African countries are going about vaccinations is varying hugely. And we are probably one of the worst ones in South Africa, as we've got a very, very, very slow vaccination process at the moment. And that's actually going to be one of our difficult things as a destination. I think some of the smaller countries like Rwanda are doing quite well. I think Ghana is doing quite well. So it's interesting that I think there's a competitive advantage to be had is on your vaccination program locally. So the ones that get further along with it and have a smaller population, or it's easier to do, will be have a competitive advantage. But thanks very much. Let's move on now and perhaps talk a little bit about the USA. So Gabriella, welcome. Gabriella is the owner of True Marketing, and I assume True Marketing specializes or does a lot of bringing people to Africa, and I'm not sure which countries, but all over Africa. So similar to the UK, back in January, there was a proclamation made that immigrant and non-immigrant entry into the United States will be suspended for individuals who are physically present within the Republic of South Africa during the 14-day period preceding their entry. I mean, that's a pretty strong, specific South Africa only statement that went out there. Is that, and I didn't ask Chris, we'll come back to the UK, is that a narrative that you think has made Americans scared of traveling to Africa or South Africa, that they believe we've got this particularly damaging virus? Has that gone out there, or did it just sort of get hidden away? And did this affect USA? Because I believe if you actually dig into it, it didn't affect USA nationals. It affected me if I wanted to come to the USA. I couldn't.
Yeah, that's correct. But we have to remember it kind of happened with a lot of different places. You know, travel from Europe was shut down immediately. Travel from China was shut down immediately. There were so many things that happened in a very, very quick period of time. On the other side of that, so many things have also been very unclear to the American traveler. And, you know, the other thing that I always like to say is Americans don't pay attention, and they also don't like to be told what to do. So there was a little bit of an issue there, yes, of course, but I don't think that particular moment had any impact on South African travel or dreams of South African travel. The challenge that we had was the South African variant. And especially in the US, the media is very, I need to win the minute. I need to create the drama. I need to talk about, you know, I need to blame somebody for this kind of thing. You know, so there was, I think the only time that we saw, you know, a heavy impact or South Africa even being mentioned was with the variant challenge. And then that also kind of came and went in our media. It's there, but it's not as prevalent as it was, because now they're focused on spring breakers. So I wouldn't be surprised if they created, you know, a narrative of the spring break variant. Things, I think to Chris's point too, you know, viruses do mutate, they change. But what we've been really fortunate about, you know, for better or for worse, is like I said before, Americans don't like to be told what to do. We have been traveling from the get. And what happened was in the beginning, it was sort of like, well, where can I go versus where I want to go? So people were making decisions to travel domestically, wherever they, and even state to state was a little difficult between testing, the screen restrictions of, you know, going from here to there. But, you know, when South Africa opened and, you know, certain islands in the Caribbean have always been opened, Croatia had a wonderful summer last year, Greece had a wonderful summer last year. The places that were open were where Americans flocked to. And we are at a very golden moment now because vaccines are moving very fast. I've been vaccinated. To my surprise, I was able to get one. Things are rolling. So what we're seeing now is that everybody predicted this pent up demand. It is here and it's bigger than ever. TSA screened 1.5 million passengers a couple of days ago, which is up 1 million people day over day versus last year, if you can imagine that. So the appetite is there. I think as far as South Africa goes, people will always want to return. I think the narrative about the variant, to my feeling, kind of came and went. It may come back again, but there'll be another country that will have a variant that they will grab onto for a few weeks and then they'll move on. I think the challenge that we face now is airlift, especially to places like South Africa. It's been compromised for us. So even I've planned a trip for July. I will be returning to South Africa. But to get the pieces of the puzzle to work, as far as my testing window and how that, you know, connections and the lack of a nonstop flight, all affect those decisions. If I can't get there in time and land with that negative result being valid, then I'm going to have a problem. So I think what's the trend right now is that Americans are going where they can go and they're taking the path of least resistance. You know, I think, does that bode well for Southern Africa at the moment? No, but that doesn't mean it's not going to return, because everything in this market is really, truly cyclical. And we've had not so much illegalities with being able to travel. It was just recommendations not to travel. But again, we haven't seen people, you know, truly paying much mind to that and wanting to travel and actually exercising their right to travel. So we've seen a very different picture. Has that had negative consequences in the US? Absolutely. You know, we've had surges, we've had spreads, but in the last couple of weeks, we've had a new administration come through. Things have changed, policies have changed, and we see a huge escalation in the number of people vaccinated and changing every single day on a really positive trend. So I'm hopeful that is the game changer that we all expected here in the US. And I don't think Americans are all like, it was interesting, the perspective before of saying how quickly you get vaccinated. I think the American mindset is not really focused on that. It's all me. When am I going to get vaccinated so I can go? Not so worried about the other side of the fence. So I don't see that as any sort of impediment to anybody's decision. I think it's, yeah.
It's funny you say that, because really and truly, if the person coming is vaccinated, then they're the one who's made themselves safe. Whether we are or aren't vaccinated shouldn't really be a risk, as long as the vaccine is, you know, has an efficacy level that's sufficient against most of the variants, which they seem to have. So Gabriella, when you say the Americans didn't stop traveling, they went where they could. Obviously, quite a few African countries opened up earlier than South Africa did. We opened up badly in October, but by November, we opened up reasonably. But Rwanda, the Seychelles, Tanzania in particular, Kenya, were open earlier than us. Were you taking bookings? What was your experience with people going to Africa? And which country was the first choice?
Kenya, for sure. Kenya had the most movement from the beginning. Kenya and Tanzania, for sure. And I think, it was interesting. I say that the narrative has changed too, as far as how travel will be promoted. The currency, I think, in which we trade now is how has your neighbor done it safely? I think there no amount of advertising, I believe, is going to bring back this industry. I think it's all the social proof, seeing that your friend went and came back and was fine, seeing that this was, somebody had the Masai Mara to themselves, or seemingly, or somebody was at a lodge and they were the only ones there, and it was so naturally socially distanced, and they showcased their journey and came back safe, and everything was good. I think that's what propelled, and it was especially in my Facebook has constantly been blowing up, I think, for the past year, because so many people I know in this industry say, okay, where in Africa can I go? And I'm going to go and I'm going to show people. And that is what changed a lot of people's minds, not banner ads.
So it's proof of concept
not
from them.
protocols. Like, we know everybody's cleaning. We know all of this. This is not what's going to bring the industry back. It's people, showing that this can be done safely and beautifully.
Okay. So not to be, as a pun in a way, the hygiene factors literally are the hygiene factors. It's expected everywhere that there'll be protocols. It's more that proof of concept. My friend went and was safe, and using presumably, these insights I think are useful, social media to put that out there, messaging. And we tried to do that in South Africa a few times. We took people on safaris and game drives and whatever, and showed them that it could be happen. And also that the protocols, while they were applied, were not intrusive. They didn't spoil the experience in any way.
No, and I think adapt.
Yeah. Thanks, Gabriela. Jörg, welcome and good morning. Jörg runs Lebensreisen. I can't speak very good German, but anyhow, I think that's experienced journeys or experienced travel from Germany. And Jörg, just the lie of the land for us about where the Germans are. They've just gone into a stricter lockdown. They never experienced it particularly like the UK. The COVID pandemic was smaller generally, and it's still not that bad, because I do look at these numbers a lot. But what can you and can't you do in Germany, and what have the Germans been doing for the last year or so? Well, year.
Well, the situation is probably not as difficult as in other parts of the world. If I listen to the whole panel, German is challenging this COVID situation, of course, pretty much like everybody else. But it's not forbidden to travel. It's just not easily to be done with the quarantine restrictions of a 2-week strict come back to Germany quarantine. That makes it not attractive to travel for Germans. And in fact, more than 95% of all leisurely travel activities are down by zero at the moment for, let's say, 11 months or 12 months already. This is really something nobody from us could imagine can challenge our businesses. In Germany, it's quite difficult because we are just world champions in traveling, and now everybody is more or less restricted to stay at home. There is no worry. All the German people like to travel again. It's just a challenge to us to wait and keep all business companies in the tourism industry alive until it restarts. It's easily to tell, but I know it's really a challenge, especially in Africa, to survive those long time without guests and businesses. But for the German market, I guess all people come back pretty soon if this restriction ban is lifted. But I can't tell, unfortunately, not like Chris was telling us from the UK with data setting from the government in May and 21st of June, there are much more chances to travel. In Germany, we work step by step, and we are all not happy with this kind of things, because the industry for tourism needs a bigger time to plan, arrange, and coordinate things. That's not possible. But on the other hand side, probably you realized that the ban to Mallorca, a popular island in the Mediterranean, was lifted 10 days ago, and immediately we got 300 new airplanes totally filled up with guests. That's a situation we all have to keep in mind if it comes up to the point how many guests from all over the world could travel back to Africa, which is our main topic in this panel, right? And as long as other parts of the world are closed, like New Zealand will be closed for a very long time for all of our customers, but as well for the New Zealanders, they are not allowed to travel. It's an advantage for all African destinations if other popular places of the world are still locked. And I guess it's a key factor which will change the world again. The day US opens its borders will be a big, day worldwide, that other destinations will come up with the same kind of thing. All the governments worldwide, they have no clue how to overcome this COVID situation, and all Germans are not happy what our government is doing, but nobody has an idea how to do it better. And that's a big challenge, and I guess we will see a little light at the end of the tunnel. Everybody can imagine how step by step tourism to Africa is coming back and safe back again. And I just would say the same like Gabriela's telling from the US market. The German guests are still traveling, but in very tiny numbers, let's say 5 to 10% from the before COVID numbers. We book to Kenya, Tanzania, a lot to Namibia, a bit less to South Africa. But probably with the arrival, there are more Germans coming to South Africa on an individual way of book their own trips, because that's easy. And that's repeaters or those people living part-timely in Africa and in Germany. This is not stopped. I have got a nice number of friends. They are traveling up and down like they did every year. And that's a small way of freedom, which is still alive in the German market, which is probably not possible in the UK or in China at the moment. That gives me a good chance to recover the tourists coming back to Africa pretty soon if safety issues are overcome.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Jörg. It's very interesting. So we've always thought of the Germans as, I'll call them relatively intrepid travelers, a little bit less risk averse than some of our other markets. So just on that basis, how's the vaccine rollout going in Germany? Because we understand in the EU, it's been quite a lot slower than, say, the UK and the US, which have been, and China as well, which have been going very fast. And how are the Germans happy to travel before they're vaccinated, or will they wait?
I guess the German tourists would travel even without vaccination. It's a challenge of this COVID-19 is really difficult because you don't see suffering people. It's a very small amount of people getting really seriously ill with that. For the public people inside Germany, there is no danger to feel. And if these restrictions from the government, quarantine of 2 weeks coming back to Germany, if these restrictions are lifted, Germans would travel in the more or less same numbers like before, because Germany is a rich country. We get a lot of financial support to unemployed people during this year. They save more money than if an average year would be in comparison.
Yeah.
And also the tourism industry companies get a kind of governmental support to keep us a bit of alive. That I would expect. It's a big advantage for Germany, and the German tourists are coming back. I guess it would be the same like in China. There are more people like to travel FIT with rental cars. So the issue of being individual and on the safe side is there, of course, but there is no problem that Germans would not travel or don't feel safe to travel, especially to Africa. And as the background of my screen shows, it's a fantastic nature. It's perfect. I guess Africa is probably a winner with tourism after COVID-19 because it's so much nature and space, and cultural trips to big cities in China or in the US or somewhere else, probably a bit of a challenge.
Fantastic. That's such good news that the Germans, as if they wasn't 14-day quarantine when they came home, they'd be traveling more or less the same as they always did, is roughly what you're telling us. I think they're very risk averse, and certainly the ones who are intrepid enough to get to Africa will carry on coming to Africa. Chris, another question for you, because I believe after often saying in the UK that they were not going to have vaccine passports or anything like that, the UK government is now looking at either the IATA travel pass or the I've forgotten what the common pass is one of the other ones. Do you think that's going to be something that the Brits will have to also use one of those systems if they're traveling in and out of the UK, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there definitely appears to be a lot more acceptance around the vaccination certificates. The government is steering away from using the terminology of vaccine passports because that sort of adds a completely different dynamic to it. But there is a lot more talk and a lot more positive talk around the use of the vaccination certificates. Talking to our medical advisors, from an African perspective, we're all very used to traveling with vaccination certificates. Yeah. So many countries require a yellow fever certificate, and the international vaccine certificate has space for other vaccinations. So there is the space there. They simply need to develop the right protocol for it, and the countries need to adopt it. The challenge is, though, until there is that proper mass vaccination around the world, it's how you actually can police that, how you can allow people in. But from my personal perspective, I think it is very much the way forward. There's already talk around Europe and around Schengen countries around this sort of green pass. So if you've been vaccinated, to be allowed to travel. Talking to airline partners, the IATA pass system seems the technology's there. It just needs to be put in place. And that is one of the key, that I think is going to be one of the key drivers for the recovery, the right documentation. And it goes back to the sort of the protocol side of things. It's that right documentation to be able to get people moving once again.
Thanks, Chris. And then I want to come back to the narrative about the South African variant. In fact, I shouldn't even use that term. I should say the narrative about 501Y.V2. But I'm guilty too. But we try and avoid it now. We try and say 501Y.V2. It nearly comes tripping off the tongue appropriately fast. It was quite big in the UK. I mean, I'm from the UK originally. I watch Sky News every morning, which I hate watching, but I watch it because, you know, to see. I mean, I see the talk about that was quite extensive. It was covered in the Telegraph and the Guard everywhere. Has that created a fear? The British also? I think the British traveller goes across all dimensions, from the more risk averse to the very ones who are concerned about health. But has that created oh my goodness, COVID is worse in Africa, COVID is worse in South Africa? Because of course the red list really only had countries in Africa and South America on it. So a lot of other African countries, I think, were unfairly tarred with a variant brush. Are people scared? Are the Brits scared of traveling, do you think? Can we get over this narrative? Is it waning like it is in the US, or is it still bubbling along there?
It is still bubbling along, but it is beginning to wane a little bit. And I think the UK traveller is fairly risk averse, especially for the repeat visitors to Africa. And South Africa as a destination does have many repeat visitors coming out of the UK. We have our swallows, like the Germans that spend every Northern Hemisphere winter down in Southern Africa. And I think those travellers are itching to get back. Personally, I lived down in South Africa for 10 years. My mother used to come down twice a year, and she absolutely loved it. She had a trip booked last year, which has now been postponed, but she can't wait to get on a plane and get back to Africa. She's been vaccinated, ready to go. And I think there are a lot of people in that same boat that as soon as they can get out, they are going to be getting out. There's a huge demand. A recent survey from one of our media partners indicated that 77% of people are actively planning an international trip.
So one narrative I heard is that the UK is almost deliberately making it difficult because they want the spend in their economy this time. So all those rich people who spend their money outside of the UK, they must stay at home this time and spend it in the UK. Is that do you pick that up as well, that it's actually an economic driver, that they're saying, let's keep our holiday people spending their money at home?
Yeah, there is very much the driver of being able to support local businesses, and especially support the local businesses that have been closed over the last few months. So restaurants, pubs, other event venues, but also domestic holiday accommodation, sort of holiday cottages, that kind of thing. That said, most are fully booked throughout the whole of our summer, because everyone's just said, well, actually, I've got to get something booked. I've got to have something to look forward to. It's been a long winter. So there is the encouragement of that domestic spend. But it means that anyone who does want to travel internationally right now is going to have a fantastic experience.
Yeah, it's even less crowded than ever in our beautiful open spaces. And was there though, whenever it was 7th of March, no, 22nd of February, when the announcement of the pathway out of lockdown or whatever it was there a tick up in international bookings then? Did the Brits start booking on the hope that they will be allowed to travel after the 17th of May or after the 21st of June?
There was definitely an uptick in international bookings, yes, but mainly on the short haul and regional markets, not so much from the long haul markets. There's definitely been an uptick in inquiries, so inquiry levels are strong. So there is that propensity to travel. But in terms of actual confirmed bookings, people are hedging their bets a little bit, waiting and seeing. They're ready to go, but they're waiting to see what the restrictions are going to be, because it is much more likely that the regional restrictions are going to be lifted before those long haul restrictions are going to be lifted, unfortunately.
Sadly for us, Gabriela, well, the US, and how resilient are they as travelers? I mean, are they fearful? And are you seeing any changes? Because you said they traveled, they never stopped. Are you seeing any changes? Is it small, like we saw from China, we're talking about FIT, self-drive, that type of thing. Any changes in the trends, the experiences and what people are looking to do? If they holiday to Africa, I'm thinking, but even if they're going to Mexico or the Caribbean?
Absolutely. And what, one of the core elements of our business is we look after a lot of DMCs, and we've always been very focused on making your journey more enriched, and a prime example that I can share with you is Mexico. Mexico is very accessible for US travelers. I said before, where can I go versus where I want to go? Mexico had incredible numbers over this pandemic because people could go easily. But what we found is that they weren't just doing the Cancun or the Riviera Maya. They were actually getting out and exploring and making the journey a little bit more richer. So I think what people are sort of looking forward to, and I guess with relaxed penalty, relaxed terms and conditions, people actually are booking ahead with the confidence because they know they can change it without a fee and they know that there won't be any problem. But they're looking at a bigger return if they're actually going to do this, and they're going to have to worry about testing before, during, and after, and they're going to have to, arrange all of these logistics. It's got to mean more. So what we see is when, agents come to us or, want to go to our DMC, is that they're looking for much more immersive experiences. And there's no better place than South Africa for that. I think, I've been 30 times and it's been 30 different stories every single time. And I always love to talk about that. The people I meet, like meeting micro entrepreneurs, I mean, is a richer journey than anything I can ever, put together anywhere else. That kind of stuff. And especially like the family bonding, the family reunion potential, the people that haven't seen each other, doing a safari, that kind of stuff matters. So I believe it will return in spades because that is the type of experience people want. People want more, they want to get out and figure out how to make their own wine. They want to make chocolate. They want to bake bread. They want to do things that they have not been able to do. So I think people are looking for a much more complete experience versus booking something off the internet and just saying, it is true. Yeah, where can I go? But how can I make it better? If I can't go everywhere I want to go, like what can I do to make the journey better within the parameters? So I think a focus on that, and also a sheer focus on wellness. People want to be safe. People have never treasured their health more than they do now, and never valued safety cleanliness, remote spaces. So I think we're going to have a challenge with big cities moving forward. I don't see places like Paris coming back. I think people will want to do Provence instead of Paris. That kind of thing will happen. And especially as we push Southern Africa so hugely, there's no better place. It's naturally socially distanced. We always say that. And there, to be able to stay at a small lodge and really feel like you're the only one, to get an exclusive game drive, that kind of stuff is appealing, much as, we were talking about trends before. We've seen a huge trend in people chartering luxury boats in places like Greece and Croatia that are going to be open for the summer, because people want to be in that bubble. So destinations that can deliver on that, as South Africa can, between its small boutique products and its lodges, I think are going to win in the short term.
Fantastic. So I think it's interesting that you sum it up. There's two things. People want those immersive experiences. They want connectedness with family because they've been disconnected from family. And they don't want to be in the cities. There's two things there. One is the value for money. One is the safety and no crowds aspect. And I hadn't thought about that value for money equation, that now it's actually a little bit harder to travel. It must really, really give me an experience that is second to none in my life. We sort of, I'm going to give you all guys 1 minute each to just round up. So my one question to answer is, when do you think we'll get back to 2019 travel levels? And people have said how it might take 2 years, 3 years, or whatever it is. Just some thoughts on that from your outbound perspective, your marketplace, and then any particular gems for our listeners who are obviously involved in outbound and inbound and on listening to us today, as to what they need to get right. What is the most important thing at your destination to get right? We've assumed, I think, that the hygiene, sanitizing, etc. protocols are there. I think we've assumed, but we haven't touched on it, that flexibility and not getting your deposits back and all of that sort of thing in terms of travel and the spend. So my spend isn't at risk. What any particular gems from each of you, and then just your overall thoughts on when we'll be back to 2019 levels. Chris, your turn first.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for listening. I think, Gillian, you hit it. Flexibility is key. Traveling at the moment, you do have to be flexible. And it is a different environment. A lot of us used to travel on a very regular basis. Traveling now is different. Gabrielle touched on it as well, but it is possible. It is there, but you have to be 100% flexible. I think individual destinations on a trip are going to be the number one to recover before doing multiple destinations because of the multiple protocols. Looking further ahead in terms of when I see recovery to 2019 levels, I'd probably say 2023 to 2024. Still some time to go, but to one of Jörg's points, I think we are going to see increase in length of trips and increase in spend because people are going to want to have those big family, multi-generational experiences.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris. Marcus.
Right. In terms of getting back to the destination, I think safety protocol, like what China did is we use QR code screening. Like if you see on my, maybe it's reflashing. So QR code scanning. We are one of the first countries who do that to make them feel safe. I also did not mention about the demographic change. Younger generation are traveling. Let's take the example of China, October, 600 million traveling. Younger generation was about 60%, and the male to female ratio again changed, more male than female ratio, 52 to 48. So this is another change. Another big change for hoteliers, if you are listening, from the statistic of the domestic travel, more of them focusing on 4 to 5 star hotels. And hotel now are doing a lot of hot sales strategies, long-term stay strategies, including myself. I was buying more long-term stay hotels. Those are one of the factors that you can consider because China, after all, is number one spenders, according to UNWTO, which spent about 277 billion in 2018. That's my latest statistics. I mentioned about low cases. I mentioned about short distance. I did not mention about direct flight. One of the another concern that how Chinese select destinations, we are thinking if we have direct flight, then we want it to be that will be the initial flights. I also did not mention about promotion by destination. I think Gabrielle touched a little bit, and also how China ready are you as a destination. So now China ready add on the health concern, the COVID-19, which is about 67% concerned by the Chinese travelers. I think I cover regarding your last question, Jillian, about when I think this situation will improve. I want to echo on Chris' point about 2023, 2024, but China will be a bit earlier, depending a bit earlier on than that. I think 2022, we are start traveling with a nearby country and country with low cases.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you'll be traveling, but you won't perhaps be traveling back to the long haul destinations or the ones that don't meet the direct flights, the low case levels. So the demand will go where it's safe for the Chinese, and that'll be back. But perhaps some of us, I think it might take a bit longer to get the Chinese market back, but we'll see. Thanks very much, Marcus. And Gabriella?
I think for us, it's very simple. Obviously, the safety protocol, all of that isn't, that aside, which we assume, it's very simple. Just get it right. Over deliver. Make somebody so happy that they came, just envelop them with the love and the welcome. All the protocols will be in place, but make things easy. If Americans don't like hassle, arrange for, at certain properties that we've been seeing in certain destinations, will doctors come to hotels and do that test? You have to work around the mindset of the traveler, from that market. And I think you have to know who you're dealing with. And also for us, it's not about price anymore. So never do a fire sale. How you begin, we're at a reset. So how you begin is how you continue. It is not the time to set a precedent for cheap deals. That's not what people want to feel safe. So, and they're going to be skeptical if something's too cheap. So maintain your price level, maintain the integrity, and deliver value, over deliver on value, give value. I was at a 5-star hotel last week, no housekeeping. Wrong. You're getting it way wrong. And that's something so simple that you can correct. So things like that, where people miss the mark, it's not necessary at all. You can fix that. It's actually not so difficult, just over deliver on things that you always gave before, make it beautiful, and know the mindset of your traveler. I think
if you had to crystal ball gaze, well, USA outbound levels will be back to what they were in 2019.
I'm going to say 2024.
2024. Okay.
People are traveling, but they're, like I said, they're going where they kind of can go in their bubble. I think for global travel to return, it also depends on the border rollouts and all of that, where places where Americans traditionally went en masse. But yeah, I think 2023 or 2024 is realistic.
Thank you. Your last thoughts?
It's interesting. I guess we have all more or less the same expectations about the future. I think to have the same numbers like in 2019, that will take 3, maybe 4 years. But the question is, do we like to have the same numbers? Because there is a lot of created low volume, low profit guests came in numbers, or are we happy having only 75%, but with better calculations, with more happy on a higher level traveling guests? In my mind, I've got some big buses with 80 people traveling through Joburg, through Cape Town, coming for 1 week, $999 a trip or something like that, which is probably difficult to get again with the hygienic concepts, but it is also not the way I like the tourism to develop in these directions. And the future will be much more diverse. FIT, big volumes are difficult to get, but it's much better to have a huge trip in a wonderful experiences with images and feelings, like the background image of my screen here now. That's the expectations people's desire if they travel, and that's more expensive than it probably was in 2019 for some guests. So I expect 70 to 75% of the volume with better ratio, maybe after 2 years, because a number which is higher than 50%, I expect coming back at least next year, if not the second half of this year. The German market is really quick. If the restrictions are lifted, 50% will be there soon. And the other question, or the other thing I have to mention, stand tight through these hard times. There are better times ahead for everybody. and try to give best quality, get good images or good things on the mobiles of the clients or whoever is the mobile. It's and I'm surprised we are talking 1 hour, and the digitalization of the industry was not a key, but it will be a key point. And it's a challenge for everybody. Bring emotions to the mobile of the customers, because just now everybody's exhausted. They like to travel, and that's our challenge to make it happen again, to raise this desire and make bookable ways after these COVID problems are covered. So stand tight, everybody.
I like that, and thank you, Jörg. Stand tight, it's going to get better. I think just going to say to everybody, thank you for such a fantastic panel.